example I put together of what this could be. I have a few layers. I have a video background, of course. That is the thing that is what I used to put this on, but this could be anything. So anyway, first of all, this is After Effects, and the way this is the standard layout. So we have these workspaces, and I'm currently in standard. I tend to use the standard setup in most programs because if I adjust it too much, students tend to get a bit confused when they look at their own version. So the way it's set up is that we have on the left here, we have our project or asset panel. So you can see for this animation I have two assets. I have a video clip and I have a composition, and the composition is what I'm making. It's like in Premiere you have a sequence, which is where you have all of your clips cut together. In After Effects, that is a composition. And there's actually a link between Premiere and After Effects, so that you can, in your sequence, you can choose a clip and say, work with this in After Effects, and it'll open up in After Effects, and you can do some tweaking, and you can save and go out, and that effect will roll over into Premiere. But this is the project panel, and this will contain all of my assets. So if I'm using images or frame stacks or audio or whatever I'm doing, it will be located over here. On the lower part here, we have up here, since it's a panel-based thing, there's also a list here called Effects Controls, and Effects Controls is can I get back to the other one? Just a second. There we go. So Effects Controls is where we can adjust everything that we apply to an image or sequence. We'll get back to that in a second, but that's located up here as well. Then we have our timeline at the bottom, and it has a layer system, exactly like Photoshop. It's the same thing, except here you have moving images instead of static images. So you have the same type of layers. You can turn on the visibility of the layer or off. You can there's an audio thing here where I can turn the audio on and off. I can solo a layer so that it's the only layer I'm looking at. It's good for when you can have multiple layers solo. That means that those are the only ones you're looking at. It's usually it's like the opposite of turning on and off visibility. You can just like say, I only want to look at this. And then you can lock a layer so you can't accidentally do anything to it. Then there's the name of the layer, and you can see the type of the layer. And then there's some other little effect buttons here, and some other ones, motion blur and 3D layer and other stuff. We can turn a lot of things on. If you right click on this area here, on this status line, there's this thing called columns, and you can turn all of these different things on. For instance, modes is something that I usually have on, because that gives us the layer blending menu for each of these layers, so that you can do screen or any of the layer blending styles. Then there's also something called track mats, and but that we'll get to that. Then we have the timeline on the right, and right now everything has the full length of my composition, but it could also just be some of these could be like shorter, so that they would only live for a certain amount of time. Layers can be of different types. You can see here I have this one has a little text icon, so that's a text layer created with a text tool. This one has a little star, that means it's a shape layer. It actually says shape layer. The text tool uses the text I wrote with it as the name of the layer, which is kind of nifty, since that's usually a good way to identify it. But there's different types of layers. So if I go to my layer menu up here and go new, you can see that there's a text layer, a solid layer, a light, a camera. In After Effects, lights and cameras are layers. You know, like in Nuke they were nodes. It's a little odd way of doing it, but it works pretty well in this term. Then we have Null Objects, which are nice for animations or tracking work. Shape layer, adjustment layer, just like in Photoshop, so that you can apply like color adjustments to a whole stack of layers at the same time. You can import an Adobe Photoshop file and split out the layers of that Photoshop file. So one could imagine that you do like the design work in Photoshop, and you build all of the way you want your lower third graphics to look at the end, and then you bring that in, all of the layers split up, and then you can animate it the way you want. That's an option. And then in newer versions of After Effects, they created this link to Cinema 4D files. It's a 3D application, a bit like Maya, but German. So that is layers. Then up here we have our preview area. Right now it says composition, so that means it is whatever composition is active down here. And I only have one composition at the moment. I can make a new composition by clicking this composition button here. So if I click that, I will create a new composition. It will give me the option to type in like I want this to be HD 25 FPS. The duration should be in this case, let's say 200 frames. I can choose a background, etc., and then I go OK. So that creates a comp. So you can see now I have two compositions here that I can work with. And if I close this, it will pop to the other composition here. There's also this thing called a render queue, but I'll get back to that. Actually, in recent versions, it seems like Adobe wants us not to use that as much as they want us to use their media encoder software to export things. Yeah. Another thing is, this area up here can also be used to preview media. So if I double click my video clip here, you can see I get another tab and it says footage. So now I'm only looking at the footage that is in that clip. I'm not looking at my composition. And sometimes people get confused because they're working on their comp like this, and everything is going nice and fine, and then they accidentally double click a layer and they don't think about it, and now they're actually in that footage or in that layer, as it says here. So whatever you put on top is suddenly gone, because you're actually not looking at your composition, you're looking at what that layer is. So take a look at your tabs up here, and then make sure that you got the right thing. There's a lot of buttons here at the bottom. They will make sense at some point. There's like you can turn on transparency cubes, and you can look at individual colors. You can snapshot a frame if you want to say, okay, I take this frame, snapshot it, and bring it into Photoshop, and then do some retouching on it or something. You can turn on masks. You can turn on. Actually, right now I have safe lines on. So this little button here at the bottom, if I turn title and action safe on, it will create these lines, and the meaning of those lines is where you should put your stuff if you want to make sure that it's in the screen. This is not such a big problem with HD TV, but in with older TV standards, there tended to be like a rather big chunk of the image that was like obscured by the edge of the TV. I think they did that because when we're using cathode ray TVs, the image could get like wobbly at the edges because it was basically a beam doing like this all the way down. So they just masked that out. So these lines are like a guide to where you should put things. So the outer one is what's called action safe. So that is, if you want people to notice things moving, it should go inside this this box here, although the image goes all the way out here. And then the inner one is what's called a title safe, and that's where when you add text, it should usually go in that area, so you are sure that it is readable. Then it has these other lines which has to do with the cropping of frames of HD to lower formats. I actually haven't seen a lot of that happening, but I don't know, maybe some people are doing it. Especially if people are using old TVs and they have like a box making HD go on an old TV because they don't want to buy a new one, then it might be like cutting off stuff. So I don't know how long we'll have to deal with that. I would generally just go by the action and title safe for the HD format. So it's a good guide to turn on when you have to put things. I mean, if after a while you sort of like know by instinct that it has to be around here, because otherwise it might be outside the frame. Again, we have a timeline marker here. On the right here we have like a whole series of panels that you can actually change. There's an info box up on the right where you can see the color of the whatever's under the mouse. There's a preview button here. If I press play, it will play back the video. And there's like a few settings hidden down there. Then we have effects panel, which is all of our effects. It's the same thing as filters in Photoshop. The difference is that a filter, when you apply that in Photoshop, it's usually applied to the image. So it's, you put it on and then that is changed forever. Whereas effects are applied on the fly. So you can always go back and change it or remove it, and then the footage will still look the same underneath. And most of these or a lot of these are like the same things as they are in Photoshop. And then there's special ones like keying. You remember keying from Nuke, so we have key light and other things here as well. We'll get back to that. Then there's character settings, and they generally tend to pop into focus when you're working on a thing that requires that. So if I use the text tool, this tends to pop up and be active. Paragraph settings for like justification and things like that. Important shortcuts like Photoshop, spacebar and drag, zoom in and out. Spacebar tap will play back, and tap again will stop it, which is a good thing. One thing you should note, this is 2015. This will play audio if I just start it. Previous versions wouldn't play audio by default. You would have to click on the RAM preview button up here. I don't have that anymore. So that's, keep that in mind. Also, if I'm scrubbing my timeline and there's no audio, you need to hold control to get your audio to scrub. I don't know if you can hear this. We'll just try again. So that if you need to match something to the audio, you hold control. Then we have a series of tools up here. Anyway, I'll just show what I did here, and then I'll go back to the start and do the same thing again. So this is just an example of a typical lower third thing. So something like this. And this is made from a few different elements. I have two rounded boxes, I have two pieces of text, and they are moving together. Oh, go away. There. Something like this. So as you can see, they are moving in together, and I'm using some layer styles to add things like drop shadows and bevels and stuff. So let's try and do that from the start. I'll just get rid of this. There we go. And to create this, I'll find on my timeline the place where I want this to start. So maybe right here where there's a cut. So here, I will go to my rounded cube rectangle tool, and I'll click that. Now I'll just set this back so that you can see what's going on. So I have my color here. It's set to red right now. So if I drag this, I'll get this rounded thing. See, if I want a gradient on this, on my color panel up here, I can click the fill text instead of just, this will bring up a color selection tool. But if I click the fill text, I will get this pop-up box, and I can choose to use a gradient there. And this gradient will let me control the coloring. So now when I click the color box, I'll get this gradient control. So I can go and say maybe I want this to be green, and this should be, maybe this should be purple just to make it really ugly. Or maybe this. You won't miss it now, right? On the top here we have opacity markers. So if I take this one and I turn the opacity down, you can see it goes transparent. And then I can add another marker up there, and that will be opaque, so it will fade out in this area. The reason why this looks a little weird, I'll get back to that in a second. I'll just take this one, drag that back, put another one there, and make the opacity low. Okay, so I get this. I click OK, and you can see now when I take my selection tool, I get these dots here. These control the gradient. So one end and the other end. So I can make something that runs maybe a bit like, let's get it to, so this will maybe do it like this. There. So I get a piece of text that, or a piece of graphics that looks like this. One thing you should be careful of is that the way I created this shape layer, I could actually by accident have done something different. If I had this selected and I chose this, then what I'm creating is actually a mask. Okay? So if I have a layer selected when I press my my rectangle tool, I will create a mask for that layer. I don't want that. So I want to make sure that I don't have that selected. That I have nothing selected up here, and then I do this, and then I'm creating a shape layer. Okay. As an alternative, I can go up and say new shape layer, and then whatever I do will be a shape in that layer. There we go. So I have one shape layer now. Now let's just briefly look at what's going on with the shape here. So you can see that my different types of layers has some different things. My original video clip has this transform rollout. They all have that. And if I open that, you can see I have something called an anchor point. It's like the pivot point in Maya, so that's where it rotates around. There's a position which will push things around in either the X or Z axis or Y axis. There's a scale slider. There's a rotation, so we can rotate it if we need to do that. And then there's opacity, so we can change the transparency of the layer. in our video we also have audio, so there's an audio layer as well where we can see the waveform, and we can like turn down the audio and turn it up if we want to. So it's just for the audio. If we look at something like our piece of shape layer here, it has the same transform settings, so I can fade that out or in if I like. And then we have contents, and right now there's one shape in that layer, and that is the rectangle. And if I go into that, I can start to change the way it's built. So I can change the size of it. I can change the height. They're linked, unlinked. So the height and the width independently. So something like that. But the reason why it's not changing is because my gradient is the same inside. The settings for the gradient is further down here, where I can change the start point and the end point, etc. Good. So you know now that there's a lot of settings down here. Just to make this interesting, I choose my shape layer, and then I go to layer, layer styles, and I can use these layer styles, which is pretty much like in Photoshop, except you have to select it up here. So I will do bevel on this just for fun, and you can see that will add this thing down here called layer styles. Just roll this in, so I get this thing called layer styles at the bottom. So that's another thing I add, and I can go and open the bevel and boss. I can change the size of it, just make it a slight effect like so. And if I turn this off, you can see the result. So it's a little cheesy, but we have to do something. Okay, so now I'll add some text, and to do that I'll just go and grab my text tool, and I'll just type something, and the text can be moved around. And as you can see, the text tool is available over here. I can change the size of this. I can change things like the height and the width and the spacing, and so I can do whatever I like here. And this one can have like layer styles as well, so I can go in and say, okay, I want maybe a drop shadow on this one, so it creates a little drop shadow underneath it. It doesn't make it easier to read, but I could also change the color, so it's like, it doesn't get any better. So something like this. Now, if I want to animate this, I will have the interesting thing that I will move either the text or the shape. And oops, and I really want them to move together, in this case at least. So the way you link things together or parent them is by using this little twirl in the layer menu. So I want the text to follow the shape. You just click this twirl and drag it down here, and now the shape layer is its parent. So if I click the text, I can move the text around, but if I click the shape layer, the text will follow that. So that's a nice thing. So I could just animate it. The way we animate things is by, I'll just find the end point, so maybe this should be where it ends. Then, since it's my shape layer that controls the position, I will untwirl that, and I will go to transform. And in the position thing here, I will click this little stopwatch. The stopwatches are all of how to keyframe this. So this is like in Nuke where you say key. Here you just turn on the stopwatch. So that will create a key, which is represented by this little diamond shape. So it knows at frame 185 we should have this located here. Then I go back a few frames, to maybe here, and then I have to make the really hard decision whether this should be coming in from the right or the left. So I'll move it over here. If I hold shift, I can like restrict the moving, exactly like in Photoshop. So there. And you can see it will draw this animation line, and each dot represents a frame. So it will go like and if I want this to look a little more kinetic, what I'll do is I will add like an overshoot. So I'll grab it there and move it over there. So now I get this little thing coming in. Amazing. And I can tweak my keyframes here by just dragging these. So I can just make these like really close together. Maybe move them all over here so it's all a much faster thing. You get the idea. Now, if I then want this to go away at some point, maybe here it should fade out along with the whole clip here. So here somewhere I will animate the opacity. So I click the opacity button of my shape layer, and then I go forward to around here, and then I run that down to 0. So that works well for my graphic piece there, but the text is still located because it's only linked in terms of position. It's not linked in terms of any other things going on. There's several different ways to handle this in After Effects. Of course, you can just go and animate the text as well, but then you have like the same keyframe in two different places, and that's like a bit iffy. So I will just remove that animation. I'll just click here, and the animation is gone. And then instead, I will do something called a pre-composition. The thing is that I can actually have compositions inside compositions. And sometimes that is a really good way to make things happen. So what I'll do is I'll grab these two layers here, and then I will go to composition, and I will go to pre-compose, layer, pre-compose. So what this does is it pops up this thing, what it will call it, and it will move all the attributes into the new composition. So I'll go OK. So now I get this composition running, and it's animated because it's animated inside this composition. There's no animation in this one. That was what happened when I moved it to the other one. So if I double click this, I will see just this animation of it. Where is it? Where did it go? Oh, it's over there. Okay. So the animation is there. All good. So actually I can see that there's these two little dots here that tells me there's some animation going on in the transform section. Okay. I pop back to my my main clip, and this is where it comes in. And the reason why it looks different is because of the different zoom levels and stuff down here. So you can see this one is zoomed out, and this one is zoomed in. So that's the reason why it's located at different points in the timeline. They are at the same time, but I'm just looking at it differently. So I want it to fade out here. So since it's now a pre-composition, I can just go and take the opacity here, put a key on that, go forward a few frames, and then turn it down. So that will key the whole thing. So this is something that will something like that. So that is something you will do often in After Effects, because if you're building a big composition, you could end up with hundreds of layers, and it would be a terrible thing that you would have to sit here and if I just untwirl a few of these, You can see I would then have to sit here and scroll through it, and it would be a nightmare. Maybe if you had like a separate screen, you could drag this over and have it on a separate screen, but it will, at some point it will get horrible to look at. So that's why you will then organize things in pre-compositions or sub-compositions, where you can work on just this little piece, and then you can work on that, and then you have the big top composition where everything is like stacked together. Okay, so just one more thing. Maybe I want to add some effect. I don't know, something. So let's go to the presets here and effects, and see, maybe we should add a blur, and we will go and get a directional blur, and I will drag that on my pre-comp here. There. And you see that the effects control comes up, and I now have this blur thing. So if I drag the blur now, you can see it blurs vertically, but I can drag this around so that it'll blur horizontally. So my idea here is that as it animates in, it will be blurred, and then around here I put a blur length key there, and then I go there, and then I turn that down to 0, something like that. So now I should have a small animation where it's like motion blurred when it comes in, and then it's looking nice and sharp. Of course I have to tweak the keys, and you can see this. Now I have this effect rollout, and if I open that, I have directional blur, and I have these two keys here, and then I can go in and figure out that it comes in, and that one stops around there. So I can just move those. Oh, sorry. There. Just move this over like so. So that should look. That looks a little better. So for now, I want you to like just get a feel for the program, and we'll do something a little more fancy later on. So.